You do not yield.
Light it up, Danica! Light it up! Light it up! Light it up!
To whatever end find.
First, we would like to ask you, in fantasy, some names are very complicated and different from the normal names that we have, like the people and the places. So how do you know how to pronunciate them?
Yeah, so I work with Sarah on every book, and I've worked with her for a long time now, from the beginning of Throne of Glass. So every time I get a manuscript, I read through and I make a note of every name, and then we have a phone call where she tells me how to pronounce them all. So it's never me like deciding what it should be. It's always her pronunciation. And that's true for every book too, that it's always the author. It's the author's preference of how they want something pronounced. And then the narrator is just either told or given a list, or they talk to them personally. But so it makes it very easy that she just says it, and then I immediately record right after all the names the way she said them. Yeah.
All right. And apart from, of course, the pronunciation, it's also important to find the correct tone, right, for each character.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important to know the character as well. So how do you do that? How do you do that? What's the secret?
Oh, the secret. Yeah, I mean, I keep notes as I'm going, so especially like as a character changes over the course of a book, like especially in the first one, Bryce is grieving, and that change where she starts and where she ends. But a lot of it with Sarah, I send her samples, and we talk about, mostly she prefers not any accents except for very specific characters. So we'll go back and forth where I'll send her just a 30-second, what do you think about this for the Viper Queen, or, for whoever. And then she responds with, I love it, or, hey, what if we try this? And then we sort of work together that way. And then I keep little tags as I go through because it's so long and there are so many characters.
Yes, many characters.
Yeah.
Do you read it first and then you record it, or do you record while reading?
No, I get it first. And with most books, you kind of have 3 weeks to a month. With Sarah's, because I worked with her team for so long, I usually get them a couple months early. And a lot of the time I get a manuscript that I know is going to change, where there's still going to be some editing done. But I will have read the whole thing beforehand, so I know the characters, what happens. And then usually a week or so before I get the actual manuscript, and the differences are usually just editing. It's not anything story-wise. So, but I definitely read them ahead of time. Takes me a while because they're wonderfully long. But yeah, I would never go in recording it without knowing who's who or what's happening. That would be terrifying to me.
It's like jumping into a black hole.
Yes, exactly. Because then I've been in situations where you read a book and 2/3 of the way through, it's mentioned that they have an Australian accent, and you go, oh, okay, I didn't know that until now. So if you haven't read it and then you start, that, it could be a nightmare that way.
Yes.
Right. And apart from Crescent City, you've obviously narrated the Throne of Glass books, right? Mm-hmm. Which are also huge, by the way. And Aileen and Bryce are very different characters. So how different are their voices in terms of tone and pitch and everything?
Yeah, I mean, Aileen starts out, she's so much younger. She's so much more attitude, in my opinion, and has such a big arc over the course of it. Bryce starts out a little bit older, and the choice that I had made, especially with the first one, is to approach her like she's more of a cool customer. That way she's got a little more confident swagger. So in the first book, I made a concerted effort to give her much more of a kind of slightly smoother, breathier version to separate her out from Aileen. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's still my voice, still reading the book. So it's always still going to feel a little bit quite similar because it's, I have one voice. But that was sort of the distinction about where they start. And then Bryce's journey is going to take her to a very different place than where Aileen ended up.
All right. But you do a brilliant job, to be honest. I heard I'd heard the first Crescent City book and then Kingdom of Ash while I was reading it, and I hadn't noticed they were the same person.
Oh,
Honestly.
good. Oh my God. That's
Honestly.
that's the best compliment. I'll say I did the first Throne of Glass book was the third audiobook I did ever. So I felt like I kind of, I aged as Aelin aged. And I also became, I learned more about narrating as it was going on. But so it does sort of feel like that journey has been the same, where when I started out, I really didn't know what I was doing, and then did those books for so many years, and now this series, which I love.
Oh,
So hopefully I sound different, because hopefully my voice is a little deeper and like a little bit older.
It is. It's very different.
Oh, good.
So which was your favorite character to give your voice to it, and which one was the most difficult to do it?
Oh gosh. Most difficult, like any guy, because it's just, this is my natural speaking voice. So trying to, any guy that has a deep, rumbly voice, definitely. But my favorite, Aelin will always be close to my heart because I kind of grew along with her. But in Crescent City, I really love Danica, I have to say. I think it's because I wanted to be Danica and, go out and have all these secrets and be able to fight someone in the street. And just, there's so much about her that I think is so cool. So and I love their relationship, that Bryce, her relationship to how she's grieving, and how that friendship changes, even though Danica is already dead. That I really, narrating their relationship, I think is my favorite. Yeah.
Every time I hear a voice saying "light it up, Bryce," that chills, really. I love it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Sometimes when you get, after you finish a book, you get pickups a couple weeks later, and you have to go in and you have to try to match the moment. And in some of the lighted up stuff, I remember I got the pickups and I went, no, it's going to be so hard to try to match it. But yeah, I love that. I love that whole section. That gets me a bit.
Yes.
Speaking of which, have you ever gotten emotional narrating a scene?
Yeah. All the time, every book. Just, it always happens. The thing that I remember in Throne of Glass, I think it's Kingdom of Ash, where the 13 sacrifice themselves. That is the most emotional I've gotten recording, where the engineer was like, I think we should stop for a minute and like, you should, let it out, and then we'll go back, because it changes when you cry, it changes the sound. So there's a level of it that I get emotional a lot when I'm recording, and there's a level of it that you can keep, and then there's a level that's kind of have to go back and make sure the sound is the same. But usually every book towards the end, in a climactic section, usually a battle sequence, it just, there's something about, you're in a tiny room by yourself and you're telling the whole story, and it's kind of moving through you that way. And I always get emotional. The lighted up stuff got me a lot in Crescent City. And just Bryce really trying to move on and miss her friend so much, and that relationship and the person she counted on. And so all the Danica stuff, I was like tearing the whole time.
So
Right.
Would you say those type of scenes are the difficult to narrate, or do you have another difficult scenes, like long scenes, action scenes, fight scenes, like war scenes? There's so much going on.
Yeah, I would say it's way more about when they come up during the day, because it's so, like, doing an audiobook, you're talking for 8 hours at a time, with some breaks in between. But when you're reading all day, it's more whatever scene happens to come in like the last hour or two of the day, because you're just so tired. So it doesn't really matter what kind of scene it is. It's just sort of keeping the stamina up. And especially, when you get into these battle sequences they could be like 100 pages long, trying to maintain that I think is the hardest thing. So really, if whatever scene at the end of the day, when like my eyes can't read and my voice is tired and I'm losing my mind, that's definitely when it gets a lot harder. But between like steamy scenes or battle sequences, it's sort of, I don't think that really changes whether it's difficult or not. It's more that you're just kind of running a marathon as you're recording the book.
Yes. And you still have to keep track of all the voices and keep everything together, right? Not only the physical aspect, but also mentally exhausting, I imagine.
Oh yeah, and there's a point in the day where everyone just sounds the same, and you go, I can't tell anymore if they're coming out and they sound like them, or if by the end of the day they're just all a soup. But yeah, and when you're recording, especially in books like these that have so many characters and they're so long, for me at least, there's a certain point at which like I can only do so many different kinds of things, but they will flag characters as you go along. So especially someone who shows up like on page 200, I can just ask on page 750, like, can you play the tag for them? And they'll play exactly what I recorded like a week earlier. So that's the way you match it in the moment. And then sometimes you hear it and you go, oh no, that's what I did. Very rarely, very, very rarely, but.
All right. So usually you have somebody helping you as you're recording, or a team?
Just an engineer. On these books, I don't have a director. There's no one kind of giving any creative input. It's just outside of working with Sarah on what she wants for the voices, it's kind of me just in a room making choices and, fingers crossed.
And how do you say the pandemic affected your work? Because the engineer was with you, or did you go to the studio, or did you record it in your house? Did you build the studio there?
Yeah, so the first one, Earth and Blood, I did in a studio before the pandemic. I think quite a while actually before the pandemic, because I record them much earlier than when they come out. And then when everything shut down, I have a home studio that we sort of just expanded and built out and made, a lot more technically savvy. So I've been doing a lot of books from home. And I'm at kind of a 50-50 point where some publishers I go back in person, some still want home records. But because Sky and Breath is such a big project, we knew early on that I really needed to be in a studio. So I was still, we started in November and I finished in December. It was sort of spread out because of my other commitments, but I was going in wearing a mask. I'm in a room and there's glass between us. But that book, they sort of made a priority of you need to be in a studio and not at home. Because even when I'm at home and someone else is doing the engineering, there's still a technical element where they can control it if I'm in a studio. And also that, soundproofing is better than what we've done here. Yeah.
But do you narrate it with a mask at a studio?
No, it's off. So when I go to the studio, it's off, and then the microphone is sort of just about right there. Mm-hmm. And there's always the engineers that I work with. They're always there to sort of, especially when you've been reading for a long time, they'll pop in anytime I make a mistake. If I say like she walled instead of she walked or something like that, and to keep flags on characters and things like that. So they're there. And it's just so much better when you're with another person. And I always feel like I'm sort of reading to them instead of in my own tiny little box,
Yes, for sure. And, speaking of your voice and the process of narrating, well, your voice is the most important tool, right, that you've got. So do you have any self-care routine or ritual before starting a day of work?
Yeah, I don't do what I'm doing now, which is drinking coffee. But on the days that I'm recording, I have a lot of allergies, so I use a little personal steamer for a few minutes in the morning. And then I warm up and then I go into the studio and try to take throughout the day, whenever we take a break, I try kind of not to speak because you're talking for so long. And there's certain foods, I just try not to eat a giant meal in the middle of the day because then I fall asleep. But things like really drinking a lot of water, not having 2 margaritas the night before or 4 margaritas the night before. But just it's sort of more the physical stuff of limiting what you're eating and drinking so that, you aren't really dehydrated or burping a lot or digesting and that kind of thing. And then what I do now that I didn't used to do is I cool down on the way home, where I take a straw and pinch it halfway like a kazoo and do vocal slides. And an ENT taught me that, because when I was recording a couple years ago way too much and not taking as much care of myself, I started to lose my voice because I was talking for so long. And when you do that straw exercise, it lets your vocal cords, it decreases the swelling. So if you ever go to a concert and you're screaming and that kind of thing, do that afterwards, and you wake up the next morning like nothing. It's magic. It's great.
Wow.
Yeah, lots of water, green apples. That's kind of it. Yeah, lots of chapstick, because your lips get really dry as you talk.
Yes, I can imagine.
I would like to ask you something about the differences between like giving your voice to an animating series and to a audiobook. Have you ever done something like that, like an animation or a movie?
Yeah, I do all of that. I've done a bunch of commercials, video games, animated stuff. Right now I have a Geico commercial running and a Walmart commercial. I think maybe I'm in an AT&T, so I do the whole thing. I'm in a video game called Starfinder, where I play an alien who's super smart and cool and like kind of a hacker alien. But yeah, and that kind of process is so different from the books. But what I love about working on Sarah's projects is that I've been on them for so long now that I feel like I know those characters. And it's not, when you do those other things, you're kind of there for the day and then you're sort of done, or the project comes out and it's kind of over. And this, because it's been going on and there's more books coming, that it feels like I have a relationship with Bryce and Danica and everybody. Yeah.
And in a way, it's like you're bringing them to life, right?
Yes,
Sarah, right?
I hope so.
The book, but you're bringing everything to life, right? You're giving them voice.
Yeah.
All right. And is there any different type of project that you'd really like to work on as a narrator, but you still haven't got the chance to?
Oh, yeah, actually. Yeah, I've done, it feels like the one place I haven't really done stuff that I would love to is reading, narrating news articles for, Apple, the New Yorker, and that kind of thing. I just would find it's so different for me because I tend to do stuff that is so emotionally driven. That would just be really fun. But yeah, there's right now what's really big are sort of audio dramas and radio plays where it's less narrating and it's more just the dialogue, and that's been really fun to do lately. I think that's also because of the pandemic that has gotten a lot, bigger. So I've been doing a lot of that stuff, which is really fun to do.
The radio
sandwich.
The radio plays. How does that work? It's like
yeah, it works. So from my booth, there's something called Source Connect, which is basically like a very fancy audio only version of Zoom. So I'll sign into that, and all the other actors and the producers and director and engineer, you can all hear each other just through that. But you record together. You go through the scene together, get notes, go through it again, even though it's just you in your own space, but you can hear everyone. And it's so fun to do because then you're just with other people and laughing. And, sometimes those can be kind of more like an animated series where you're like a talking rabbit or something like that. And I find that I'm on one right now where I'm playing an 11-year-old kid, and it's so fun to do because it's, and it's just easier because with audiobooks, you have to go back and forth all the time between my voice, which sounds different when I'm on a mic, but my voice narrating, and then the characters' voices. And when you do multicast work, you're just that character. So you only have to think about that. It makes it much, much easier. Yeah.
That sounds so much fun.
It is fun.
It's so nice to have something with Throne of Glass or Crescent City like that. Like
it was. That's a brilliant idea. They should do it. Oh, that'd be my dream. It'd be so great. I sort of do that in my mind where I'm going, oh, okay, if this is who I would cast as this character. So I'll try to vocally sound a little bit more like them. And audiobooks, there's there's this line where, because it's not animated, you don't want to go too far with character voices, but you want to do enough that it feels different. So I think that would be so fun if they did that. They just cast it and then, oh, that would be a dream.
At least one scene, like just one Aileen and Rowan talking. I don't know. It would be so fun to.
It'd also be great just to, you know, you'd hear a guy like doing that part of it. Yeah. Oh, that'd be so fun. Make it happen.
Make it happen. If it were to happen, who would you like to play? Which character would you like to play?
I mean, I definitely want to be Bryce for sure. I mean, I just, because you're in her head the whole time, so I feel so connected to her that way.
Yeah.
If not, make me the Viper Queen. I would die to be the Viper Queen. I think she's so cool. Probably does not look like me and what I've imagined, but just would be so fun to do.
Yes, definitely. So, Gabi, do you have any other questions?
No, I think it was it.
I think we're good. Yes, it was amazing talking to you, Elizabeth. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's so fun. It's so lovely to meet both of you.
Thank you for your time and for giving these characters so much life and I don't know. Thank you.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Elizabeth. It was a huge, huge pleasure.
Yes, me too. Thank you both. All right. Have a lovely day.
You too.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.